Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first Lowe's Foods virtual beer hunting event here at NoDa Brewing. I'm John Dispenza.
And I'm Harrison Hickok. You may recognize us from Untapped's Drinking Socially podcast, but today we're going to be your hosts.
That's right, Harrison. We're going to be hanging out virtually with Chad Henderson, the co-owner and head brewer of NoDa Brewing. Chad will be walking us through the 5 incredible beers that came in your virtual beer hunting box.
And if you're the scouting type like me and you want to be prepared, we'll be starting off the day tasting Blood Orange Goza, then moving on to Haze Solo, then Lager Days, Radio Haze, and ending with the one and only Hop, Drop, and Roll. As you're drinking these beers at home, we'll be answering your questions live on the broadcast. So if you want to sit back, relax, and just drink along, feel free to stay right where you are. But if you want to chat and ask questions, now's your chance. Just make sure you click watch on YouTube.
And if you're on social media already, make sure you tag at Lowe's Foods, at NoDa Brewing, and use the hashtags Beer Hunting Season, Virtual Beer Tasting, and Virtual Hunt Club. And if you're on Untapped, make sure you check in your beers so you can earn the Virtual Beer Hunting badge for this event. Now, to do that, grab the Hunt Club card that came in your box that looks like this on the screen. Flip it over, grab your smartphone, and open the camera. We've all done this a few times by now. Scan that QR code. And that code's going to open up the Untapped app in your browser on your phone. And from there, you're halfway done. Just hit that green check in here button. Select the beer you're drinking. You can check into any of the ones or all of the ones we're drinking today. Take a photo, add some notes, rate the beer, and then hit that check-in button and celebrate with a badge.
And if you're enjoying yourself today, save the date for the next virtual beer hunting event on May 15th. We'll be coming to you from Edmonds Oast. You can grab a beer box from your local Lowe's Foods beer den starting on May 1st.
All right, that's enough from us. Let's get out to NoDa and say hi to Chad.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Chad.
Hey, Chad, good to have you, man.
Great to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about NoDa Brewing while we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Subject, in fact. We're actually standing on our relatively new brew house. We have a 60-barrel brew house right here. We are based out of a neighborhood. We're based and named after the NoDa neighborhood in Charlotte. NoDa stands for North Davidson, which is basically just a street that runs through our downtown and becomes this cool little arts district. And we started our original 15-barrel brew house right on North Davidson. And North Davidson's known for all the kind of franchise-free businesses that are there, and lots of art in food and arts in artwork galleries and music venues and stuff like that. So we decided that we wanted to do art in a fermented beverage form. And so to kind of encapsulate that, we went with the NoDa neighborhood as kind of like our namesake. And about 3 years after being there, we grew up into our current location, which is just about a mile down the road on North Tryon, which is, again, just another street that runs right through the middle of downtown Charlotte. And we are now in a 36,000 square foot facility with a 60-barrel brew house. We still have the old location, but we are steadily growing. And we just recently had the fortune of being able to say that we are now fully available in the entirety of North and South Carolina. Wow. We're coming on to our 10-year anniversary. We've won a handful of some pretty major medals, World Beer Cup and the GABF over that tenure. And I'm very blessed to have this job. Like you said, and co-owner, I've been with them since the very beginning. And I wake up very, very blessed to do what I do, even if it is at like midnight to come in to brew away. So it's awesome. We work really, really hard here. We have the best staff in the world, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased on that, but everyone that works here really loves not only the brand, they love the industry. And we're all a bunch of beer nerds that just like to do our best to make an impact in any way that pushes the industry forward and keeps our brand kind of up at the forefront of what people would consider to be a consistent, fun, and entertaining product.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know about you, John, but I'm excited to drink some of these beers now. We're starting off with a killer one. So everyone at home will be back in 60 seconds to taste Blood Orange Goza first.
Nice.
All right.
So,
and we're back. Hopefully you guys all have this beer in your hand out there, or maybe now it's in a glass. But I am pumped to drink it, especially with today in North Carolina. Well, it got up to, I think, about 70 something. So for me, these kinds of beers always scream summer, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about kind of what a kettle sour German wheat beer, what a Goza actually is.
Right. Yeah. No, it's one of those beers that it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think it's one of the newer styles that became popular, because like as far as sour beers is concerned, and what's kind of funny with it is you always have to kind of introduce what a Goza is to someone who's not aware what it is and explain a lot of it. But in the long run, it's probably one of the most approachable sours you can possibly have. Like I think it's everyone's easy to get into sour sort of beer, because this beer undergoes everyone kind of has their own way of doing it, but we do a really simple lactic acid fermentation via a kettle souring. Yep. So for us on the production side, that makes it really simple, because it only ties up the system for a couple of days to produce lactic acid to get that nice little simple bright tartness to it. And then after that, it goes through the entire normal process of being boiled and all that sort of stuff. We don't have to worry about barrel aging for a long period of time. So we can push these out in pretty fast succession, just like any other beer. But you do get that fun tart character for it, but you don't have the big funky notes of barrel-aged sours or wild fermented XYZ beers and stuff like that. So they're pretty straightforward, and they are about half. Ours, at least, this one is about 50% wheat malt. The rest of it is just base malt and a little bit of acidulated. It's really low on hops. So anyone who doesn't like hoppy beers or bitter beers, then this is another one of those cool, easy reference ones. But the other thing that makes it kind of unique too is it adds another layer of refreshment to it, because we use a lot of salt in the whirlpool. So Gozas are traditionally salted, so there is a little bit of a brininess to it. So that you're going to get on the back end of the beer. And we actually do a year-round rotation of different sorts of themes of fruits for these. So this is the one we have recently come out with about a month or so ago, which obviously features blood orange in it. And blood orange, a lot of people actually, I don't think, really understand what blood oranges taste like, because they don't eat them as often as a normal orange. But blood orange isn't just like an ultra juicy orange. I think it's actually more akin to a grapefruit. It's usually pretty tart. It definitely has citrusy character to it, but it's nowhere near as orangey as what you would think. But that lends, we use blood orange puree in it and a little bit of blood orange zest to kind of give that little citrus note to it, add another layer to the light tartness to it, and then basically just have this really easy, crushable 4% alcohol beer with really low hop character to it, a little bit of brine on it, and a nice clean tartness. So when it comes down to refreshing hot weather, which 90% of our year here in Charlotte is very hot weather and very high humidity, it's nice to have something that's refreshing. And also, if you're trying to dip a toe into the sour pool, this is not going to just completely rip you out of reality with just tons of different nuances and whatnot. It's just a very clean, easy drinking beer.
That's a great point. You're right. I mean, this style you hear about sour beers a lot. They're trending on Untappd all the time, but it can be overwhelming if you grab some kind of mixed firm thing the first time you have it and you're like, what is this? This tastes like apple cider vinegar. And obviously this is nothing like that. This is so refreshing. Makes you want to take another sip. And that's kind of what that tartness does a little bit. It kind of invites that next sip to be like, ooh, let's get that refreshing kind of hit of fruit and tart and a little bit of saltiness going again and again. So yeah, these beers, thank goodness they're 4%, because they're easy to enjoy a few of.
Right. Yeah. They go down very quickly. And we actually also, I forgot to mention, but we do enzyme to make these gluten reduced as well.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so it's not gluten free. We don't do any full on, because a lot of people don't realize in the food world, you just have to be below a certain threshold to be gluten free. But in the beer world, if there was ever any gluten that touched anything along the way, you can't call it gluten free. So we use an enzyme to get the gluten level below, I think it's 100 or 10 parts per million or something like that. I forget exactly the number for it. But yeah, we can get it below the number. So if you do have celiacs or something, or you have a friend that's visiting the tap room and they have that sort of a concern, then this is another option that they can go to. So, and all of our Gozas are like that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do you, Chad? So you said you did this one with blood orange puree. You add when you're adding fruit to a Goza. So when you're thinking about what fruits to put into your kettle sours, is it mainly for flavor, or do different fruits bring other problems with them?
No, it's
More sugar.
mostly for flavor and what we think would work really well with the with the flavor profile of what the baseline goza is. We don't really have a base goza. We are actually the very first one we did, I think 7 or 8 years ago, what we called What Goes Around, and we did it as a little merry-go-round sort of like label for it. And that one was just as straightforward. But the traditional goza typically has coriander in it as well.
Right.
So it was just a straightforward, I think it was like 3.5%. This beer, but with coriander in it. And so once we kind of got an idea of what that was, all the fruits that followed were just like, what else could go well with this? And so like a perfect example of that is one that we actually just brewed this past week is our margarita goza. Because the beer already has like a briny salt character to it. So it's like, well, let's mimic triple sec by throwing tangerine in it, and we'll just throw a lot of lime in it as well. And it comes out like right when pool season starts up. So it's, it's like drinking a beer version of a margarita. So, and we do passion fruit, we do pink guava. And sometimes it's designed to be kind of a contrast to so when you have like blood orange, you already have a tart based beer. It's like blood orange itself is slightly tart. Like, let's just keep riding that train forward. And then sometimes you look at it and like, hey, let's take passion fruit, which is a little bit sweeter, and let's have like a nice yin and yang balancing act that goes on to it. Because to some people, this can almost be too dry, too tart. And sometimes having a fruit that's a little bit of a sweet contrast to it can add another characteristic to it as well. Ultimately, though, the biggest thing is that we really want to make sure that it sings brightness. Like the sweetest one we do for actually breast cancer awareness thing in October. That is a mixed berry one that has a lot of raspberries in it. But even that's still not that sweet. It's still pretty bright. So we're not trying to go for anything that just becomes cloying. We want all the fruits that we throw in there to be a bright accent, whether it be a nice balancing act or if it just keeps pushing that brisk, refreshing tart character forward.
Awesome. Now, when you're enjoying these by the pool or wherever, Chad, is there like a go-to food you think goes well with it? I mean, it's already got fruit in it, but are you kind of doing a yin and yang thing, or are you having a fruit salad? Like, what's your move?
I think that it's really good if you do I don't really eat food with them while I'm at the pool itself,
right?
But personally, but
poolside cheese
buffet,
that's right.
But I do think if you were having like a dinner party and you wanted to have this, like if you had like one of those like spring salads that's got like strawberries and blueberries and like a lighter vinaigrette, this just complements with that like crazy. And that's one of my favorite things with beer is that you don't have to always do a contrast with a food pairing. You can do a complementary food pairing with it as well. And I just think lighter fare in general works with it, and especially if you do like a first course or an appetizer and you have like bright berries or a fruit salad or something like that, or a fruited salad of any other type with a lighter vinaigrette, it works really well with it.
Fantastic.
I love that there's like food and wine, I think, has always had this like stigma of you have to know about the wine and the food you're eating to make a good pairing. And whether or not that's true, I love that about beer. Like, eat whatever you want with it. It's probably going to taste really good. But thinking about this with a fruited salad is making me hungry.
Right.
So you've won. that worked.
Nice. I was going to try and wait to get into the trail mix, but it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later. So I'm sure some of you guys at home are also diving in. This is second dinner for me tonight, so I probably shouldn't wait too long. That's good.
The cranberries in that one, the one that has the raisins and everything like those would actually work pretty well with as a nice like contrast for it as well and everything. And it's just one of those things where there's some beers that are just super versatile, and like we do for all of our beers as they come out to market, our marketing team will ask me like, can you give some tasting notes and food recommendations for this beer? And some of them on food, I'm like, whatever's close to you and edible, like, just go for it. And then there's some too where it's just like, just get another beer and you're fine. It's like, it's all good. Right. So, there's definitely an art form to it, and you can definitely deep dive into it. And a lot of like icons of the industry, like Garrett Oliver, have done a ton of more work than I ever care to do on really going into like the sensory level of what you can truly experience by putting the right food and the right beer together. But also you can approach it with the most casual attitude in the world and just experiment on your own and see whatever works out. And sometimes you'll just run into a gym that's like super weird and specific to yourself. And you're like, if you get this beer from this brewery and you have this, my neighbor makes a killer flank steak or something, you're like, you can have fun with it. And I think and that's the biggest thing with beer in general, is that at the end of the day, this should just elevate your day. It's something you want to have fun with. So if you're going to have fun doing it, it doesn't matter if you made the perfect pair or not, enjoy it. That's what the beer is for.
I love it. Sweet. I think we have some questions out there. You guys are
fire away.
Chipping away. Yeah. What do we got?
Ooh, here's a good one. This is definitely for you, Chad. What brewers have inspired you along your brewery journey? This is from Keith Anderson, master of the Beer Run, our Lowe's Foods beverage merchandiser. What's up, Keith?
Awesome.
Yeah, cheers, Keith.
Cheers. There's a lot. So and it's unique because there's people that were inspired me when I was trying to get into the beer industry, and then there's people that inspired me as I was making the first steps, and there's people that inspire me like still to this day. But when I was getting in the beer industry, there was some just kind of icons of the industry that I not only looked up to, I got to meet early on as a really big beer nerd, and meeting them and talking to them, and them taking the time to actually talk to me and answer really absurd questions that I had or take comments from me and whatnot. And I was like, amongst a massive amount of people that were all waiting in line to get a beer or something like that, meant a lot, and it really kind of shoved me in the right direction. But names like Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head was a huge person that really that actually did exactly that. I stood in line. I helped set up an event in Denver with him probably 14 years ago.
Wow!
And I came up to his booth, and I was like, I just want to tell you, I'm a home brewer, and the reason why I homebrew is because like how creative stuff from Dogfish Head is.
Yep.
And he was like, "Oh, dude, yeah, come around the side of the table. What do you think we could do better?" And I'm like, "There's 900 people like in line, and you want to talk to me about what I think you should do better." So and I've stayed in touch with him ever since then. So like I actually, we'll run into each other at different events and stuff like that, and we've done like podcasts and everything like that. He's a super humble guy, and I think that the way that he represented his brand and the risky stuff that he did, I think maybe not afraid to take steps to do stuff that I did as a risky person as a home brewer that let me get noticed by eventually the founders of NoDa, and they invited me to be part of the team. Because like, this guy's insane and he wants to keep doing all these crazy stuff. So you guys should probably hire him to do this crazy idea. But also people like Lauren Salazar. She's not Salazar now, but she works with New Belgium. Getting to hang out with her early on, and the plethora of knowledge that she had was just crazy when it comes down to sensory development and understanding nuances in beer was crazy. Entire brands like Founders Brewing Company, and after kind of getting our brewery started up and being able to get exposed to it, the guys like at Firestone Walker, like those beers are just so insanely good and consistent. It's like that's like to me now, it's like I would love to one day think that we are on a consistency level with brands like that, because this is so hard to make that beer go so far and be that consistently good every time you get their stuff. So, all those guys inspired me when I was starting out, and and it never stops. This is one thing that's really great about this industry is that it is a constant, like everyone wants to see everyone else succeed, like, so if you have a problem or you have an issue, someone right there that's quote unquote a competitor in the industry is more than likely going to be happy to help you out or tell you what they think about that situation. And so like, there's so much of camaraderie in this industry that like everyone kind of bounces off of everyone else. So when we first started out, we about a couple months after we opened, a brewery opened up essentially sharing the same driveway next to us called Birdsong Brewing. They're still here in Charlotte doing a great job. Us feeding off of them and then feeding off of just like the vibe that we were young as crap, just trying to make it. So a lot of that, was inspiring for us to just be next to, another growing brewery and to be able to share ideas and stuff like that. So it's an endless list. But when I first started out, though, breweries like Dogfish Head, Founders, and all those guys, it's a very long. I was nerding out a lot of breweries. Actually, Weyerbacher was a huge one, that I was obsessed with. I actually helped run a beer club down here in Charlotte, and when I heard that we were having the Weyerbacher's brewmaster come into town, I actually like did like a kneeled on my knees and bowed to him, like when he walked in. And he was like, "What's going on?" Yes, but, again, all these people that you told up at like as kind of this beer celebrity iconic nature, they're all just people that work really hard to get where they're at, and they appreciate just people appreciating what they do, so they're mostly just really humble and want to share everything that they have along the way. And it's not the easiest industry to get into, but the people that are there to to help you along the way, there's not a shortage of them. So I was very lucky to meet who I got to meet in the time frame when I was a budding beer nerd.
That's great. And that's something to hear from a lot of brewers that the brotherhood, the camaraderie, how everyone's lifting each other up, and it's certainly been my experience as well. Both our experiences from, being in this industry as long as we have. So that's really cool. I mean, yeah, right. You guys kind of came along right after kind of Dogfish Head, and all those guys broke a lot of rules and said, let's do things differently, and that made craft beer exciting and brand new again. So that's fantastic. Cool. I think we have another question. There we are. All right, awesome. Yes, Brian. He sneaky good. Agreed. Yes. Exactly. Not even that sneaky. It's like super. It's right up there in front. But I know. I think we're kind of learning. Maybe not everybody knows that this should be something you should be thinking about when you're mowing your lawn, or I mean, really doing anything. But this time of year, now all I can think about is that margarita one you guys have coming up. And I was
really proud of that one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, there's salt in here, so it's pretty much akin to Gatorade, I think. Sure, if you're mowing the lawn, it's a sports drink.
It's important.
We haven't got the word back from the lab yet, but we're pretty sure it's essentially a sports drink.
Yeah.
It's good for you. It's got minerals in it.
Yeah. So now that everybody's sports drink hydrated and we've had our first beer, let's take a quick dive at what else is in that box. And then, of course, make sure you stick around because we're going to be drinking, I don't know if I can say a Star Wars themed beer, but Haze Solo. We'll be drinking a beer called Haze Solo.
All right, so we're going to do an unboxing here of this amazing package that features obviously the tasting for the beers itself, but it's also got some food consumables in there, and here to help me eat those is Mr. Cody.
Hey guys.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and unbox this awesome package that looks pretty intense.
Yeah, this is awesome. It feels like I'm opening up a Christmas present. Maybe some hunting boots in here.
Yes, but the next best thing is trail mix. So these are actually named after trails in North Carolina, and they are packaged in North Carolina. This is the Loblolly Trail one that I have, and you got.
Nice. I got a bee trail mix.
Nice. And mine has probiotic yogurt raisins, almonds, and dark chocolate cranberries, which sounds pretty good.
This is honey peanuts, ale nuts, Cajun corn sticks, sesame sticks, and Cajun pecans.
Awesome. So obviously, when you're enjoying beers, little bar mix is obviously something really good to enjoy them with, and to have a nice diversity of two distinctly different types of kind of pub mix, so to speak, can definitely give you two very different options. Obviously, you have a more sweet, and then you have a more kind of spiced and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little sample. I got a good mix of the cranberries and the dark chocolate and the yogurt and the almond in that one. So I'm one that likes to let all the flavors melt, so I just kind of pop them all back instead of eating them then one by one. Gracious. That's good. That's like super fruity and sweet, but not overly sweet. Oh, I love dark chocolate. So
this has just the perfect amount of Cajun spice to it. A slight, like the salty and the sweet mixed to it. Oh, that's really good.
You want to
I
switch?
go back for seconds. Yeah, switch.
Oh, and cheers, by the way. Yeah,
Cheers.
can't be rude. So that one is a lot more of like the almonds do have like a firmer texture, but it's a much softer texture. This is obviously going to be crispier.
That's good when you get all of that together.
Yeah, just blend them. That's very good. I can definitely see a wide variety of beers be enjoyed with both of them.
That's exactly what I was just going to ask.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, when you do beers, you can do complementary and contrast food pairings. Beer is acidic by nature, but it's nowhere near as acidic as wine is. And in wine, you typically, not always, but you typically do contrast pairings because of the acid level in it, which makes sense. But with beer, the acid's not quite as intense, so you can go sweet with sweet. Like you can do a dark, rich chocolate coffee-esque sort of beer with sweeter stuff in it, or you can contrast it with spicier notes, and vice versa. You can go like a drier, hoppier beer and put the spicier notes with it, or you can add something to fill in the gap. So you can complement or contrast, and both of these would work with the full spectrum of beer. I think that's not only in the packet, but in general that you would have to sip on at home or anywhere else for that matter. So very good job on that. That's delicious. And it's cool that it's packaged here in state. So let's go on and move to the next part and get to the meat of the box, so to speak. Let's get some jerky in. So let's hop on the jerky. All right, now we are on to the meatier part of the box here. We got the beef jerky. We got 2 varieties here. I've got the teriyaki one. Cody's got the original. And cheers, man. Let's enjoy some meat.
Cheers.
I love jerky personally. So
I do too.
I was excited for this for a long time. And it's,
Oh wow,
it's really good.
tender.
It is. I hate it when jerky's like too dry or it's too soft, because too soft just makes it taste like it wasn't finished. And when it's too dry, you just kind of are chewing on it for about 2 hours, and then you're finally able to swallow it. But these are great. It's really nice.
That's so good. One more, just for good measure.
Absolutely. And this is another one of those things they always go good with any beer. The teriyaki is not overly sweet. That's another thing that I really like about it, because teriyaki can sometimes get like to a candy level of sweet on already savory meat. And I'm excited to try the original too.
Should we switch?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's pretty neutral there.
Yeah.
I really like that. Good flavor.
Yeah, they're both pretty even keeled. They're exactly what you expect, and that makes them, again, really versatile to pairing with beer. Great thing that if you're at the beer den, grab one of these and just enjoy any beer of your choosing. They pair up really well. Nothing like savory meat with a little bit of tang to go with the beer. But yeah,
Oh,
I love it.
5
Very
out of
good.
5. Really good.
Would eat again.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So also underneath the jerky,
It's the best part. Ooh.
the beers. So we hope you guys have some of
Look at
these
that.
out already. And I am already in midway of tasting them with you. So let's go on back to myself. I'll teleport over and we'll keep tasting the beers.
Wow, we're drinking Haze Solo, and I've already taken a sip. This is great.
Couldn't
That's-
wait. Could not wait. That nose on this thing, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Here we go. And yeah, right. I'm glad, once again, glad
have
we're
you
starting with the
done?
sessionable stuff. Woo. This is easy to drink. So I guess we could start there. So some brewers, I know sometimes are kind of like protective of the hop profile, or sometimes it changes all the time. But for this beer, what are we kind of working with on the hop profile? Are we dry hopping? Like let's talk a little bit about that, I guess, to start, because this is amazing.
Yeah, thank you, first of all. I'm really proud of this beer. This is, we actually did a test run of it last year.
Okay.
And so, but it's new this year as a full-blown year-round product. And it's one of our 2 beers that we are starting to carton now. So we have 8-packs cartons of it. But I'm super proud of it because the flavor, I'm really happy, one, with the flavor profile and the research I did to get it to where it's at, which is kind of like its own little nugget, but also the fact that it can have that flavor and aroma profile and be as low in calorie and carb as it is.
Yes.
So I'm super excited with that. And it's been my house staple for me and my wife, actually, since we released it. They're like, you mean we can have this and have like almost no guilt? And I'm like, yeah, of course. But as far as hop profile for this, I approach hazies not as much as what specific hops are in them. I'll tell you what are in them specifically, of course, but I look at it less as like I'm trying to get this hop's flavor out of it. I look at what will this hop give me as far as oil complexes to do biotransformation, which is really the key for hazies to make that juicy jump. You know, when you always hear hazy juicies, like that juicy characteristic of the aroma and the flavor really comes out of biotransformation, of having the right types of grain, the right types of yeast, and adding the right types of hops at the right time. I know I said time a lot. And basically what you're getting is you're taking small, little tiny oil substrates out of the hops that most people ignore. and they are pulled away, and the yeast will start to actually like convert them into other byproducts, and the right types of protein from the grain will hold them in suspension, and that's what you actually end up smelling. So smelling a raw hop and then using it for biotransformation, you might get completely different flavors out of it. And this completely, I really try to do a lot of research with ongoing new developments in hop profiles and being able to extract different information from the really like nano parts of hops. And last year in March, they did a science research discovery, essentially polyfunctional thiols, which is your word of the day. And it's it's a sulfur compound, and it's in these hops that a lot of people aren't using. And for example, are CTZ for dry hopping at least, and Equinaut, which is used fairly decently, but it isn't getting a ton of love. And basically, when you have these hops that are high in polyfunctional thiols, when you put them in the biotransformation, they give you a ton of like passion fruit characteristics and bright grapefruit character and hints of black currant. And I was like, all right, got it. Let's go. Let's make this beer off this. So this entire beer's hop profile has been based off of utilizing high polyfunctional thiol content of Equinaut hops, mosaic hops, and then using a little bit of CTZ to just ramp up that polyfunctional thiol character. So you get this really nice tropical, bright grapefruit, passion fruit noted, and then even like slightly like dark or tart cherry character from it, all on top of a hazy. Now it is a little thin, but that's kind of the part of it, is that, you know, it is 4.3%, and you're only taking in, for a 12-ounce pour, I think it's 96 calories. And so it's really, really low in the calorie, hits its name. And also you have the fact that it's only, I think, 2.4 grams of carbs in a 12-ounce pour.
Wow.
So you're looking at the advertised ultra light beers and stuff like that, their stats, but on a hazy IPA. Right. So you're sacrificing very little and gaining a lot. Yeah.
Any of the beers I've had at a ballpark that match this in terms of calories do not come close to the flavor. It's like you've done magic, and you kind of explained it in a very scientific way. I felt like I was talking to Doc Brown for a moment. That's beautiful.
So, and that's what we try to do with all of our hop development in general, and all of our hazies. You know, when we moved to the other hazy we have in the group, that my entire I did a 1.5 year R&D for that beer, based on just a ton of different information that was provided from people that have done a lot more work than I did in the industry. But, you know, if you put the right pieces together, you can make really creative flavors off these hops. But then, you know, on the second side of it, I found out how to make a profile that would work to give you those low calories and low carbs at the same time. So if you want to have high flavor but not a lot of guilt to follow with it, then Haze Solo is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's truly impressive. And John and I have talked about on the podcast a little bit, right? Like being able to make what like a sessionable hazy IPA that has a lot of flavor. It's tough because you're balancing, you know, all the malt to work with. You don't want to have it be some unbalanced kind of hot bomb because there's no malt profile to back it up. And this just does that dance so well between the nose on this thing is unbelievable. If I just smelled it, yeah, I'd be like, this is 8% double IPA. Here we go. But it's not.
The aroma profile on this beer, especially when it's really fresh right out of the gate, which of course I'm privy to as they get into the cans. I've been on record saying it's my favorite aroma of any beer we've ever made. Yeah. And a lot of it does come from like applying research to like being like, let's see if these parts that you know are from a part of the science I didn't even know existed, if that's actually going to come through fully on it. And it did, and I was super happy with it. And just to have that layer of aroma and flavor on top of those stats, it's just the icing on the cake.
It's impressive. Cool.
Thank you. I'm jealous. It's like you've served me a 0-calorie birthday cake. Speaking of me being jealous, we got a question in from YouTube from a user whose name I won't try and pronounce, but the question is alcohol level the same from year to year? I love this haze, so thank you, YouTube user, but that's a good question. Does the alcohol level vary sometimes for you when you're trying to brew these all year?
There's always like a small amount of variation for it, but we try to keep it right into what we advertise it for. If we feel for whatever reason we need to raise or lower it, we will change the label to reflect it. So we're given a small window of variation on it, but it stays in that variation window. And if it doesn't stay in that, then we will get the label changed over. And that rarely ever happens. There's a couple of times where we've taken a brand where we say, you know what, it needs to knock back a little bit, or this beer is too residually sweet. We need to bump it up a little bit and over attenuate it or dry it out, right, and get a new ABV. But when we do that, we change the label to reflect it. It's very rare that happens, but we really try to nail the alcohol level on it as often as possible. But cheers, and thank you for loving the beer too.
All right, we got another question coming up from Derek Tuzboy saying, really great for fighting against the beer gut. That's right.
You get it, Derek.
Exactly. Yes. I've been sitting in front of Zoom for a year plus and moving less than ever. So that is something I think about more than ever, fighting the beer gut. But right, I mean, kind of to your earlier point, Chad, it's low, not a lot of guilt here in this beer. Low calorie.
Yeah, my two of my big things I love. Obviously, beer is one of them. I don't know if you can tell, but I love beer. But I got my degree in actually exercise physiology. I love lifting weights and working out and stuff like that. And they don't always go hand in hand the best. So right. Being in the industry and whatnot, it's one of those things where it's always kind of in the back of your head. But I don't want to sacrifice like the things I love about beer for just simply saying that I took in less calories too. So this is kind of like a nice in between that you can kind of have somewhat of both worlds if you're trying to like count calories, count carbs and stuff like that, but still really have a really high end flavor and high end aroma. And especially a beer that's a super popular style right now, with being, the haze craze is in full swing. And to have an option that you can go to where you can get a lot of those characteristics that you love from the hazies, but not worry about the heavy implications afterwards is really nice.
It is.
Here's a question from Brad, the Lowe's Foods Beer Den Master at store number 270. So this is great. This is right on topic. How did you get from your degree in the medical field into brewing? Asking for a friend because my degree is in kinesiology or something that sounds like that.
Kinesiology is very similar actually what I got my degree in. So yeah, kinesiology is like the science of physiology in motion. So yeah, cheers to that. But I discovered that I wanted to be in the beer industry shortly before I got my degree. So I was like, at that time, I was like, well, what do I do now? So I spent a lot of time doing something I really respect and I enjoyed. But I knew I wanted to get in the beer industry itself. So basically, I spent all my free time and all my free money to be involved in everything beer related in the Charlotte area. I moved to Charlotte shortly after graduating, and I worked in the medical industry. But I was a big home brewer, and luckily here in Charlotte there was a really good home brew club, the Carolina Brewmasters. So you could get in there, and you'd have all these people with tons of experience. And as the industry was growing in North Carolina, so right before I graduated, like 2 years before I graduated. The Pop the Cap initiative happened. So for some people who aren't aware, back in, I believe, 2005, you couldn't sell or produce beer in the state of North Carolina over 6% alcohol. So that was a lot of breweries just couldn't sell their most popular beers in the area. And when that changed, bumped it up to 15%, then all this huge influx of beer started coming in. So I got exposed to a lot of these breweries and really learned that craft beer was more of a story and an art form than just simply a product that was, I assumed beer was made just like in any other factory, like where a soda was made from. I didn't think there was a whole lot other to it. And I had practiced a lot of alcohol manipulation in college along the way. I wasn't, I know I'm the only one, sure. But but I did not like beer at all when I was in college. I was like, I don't understand it. It tastes like cold sweat and it doesn't get you any of the fun aspects of alcohol with the very naive mind of the idea of like, oh, you gotta get buzzed eventually. But so I started doing mixed drinks and I took a lot of creativity in that. And I really liked the idea of mixed drinks. And then when the craft beer started rolling in, I was like, this stuff's fantastic. And not to go into too long of a detail with it, but essentially I discovered like how to make craft beer because I was like, this stuff's worth it. I like this stuff a lot more, and I want to know how to make it. And I just fell down the rabbit hole of like, oh my god, this is so much more. And already being in science, seeing that you're relying on a yeast to literally propagate out, the final product. I was like, this is awesome. I need to start doing this. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And it was the process, but then it was the entire culture that came along with that process and just the stories behind all the beers and the brewers and the all that sort of stuff I just fell in love with. So I basically spent all my time trying to be involved in anything dealing with craft beer promotion and events and all that sort of stuff. And eventually my name got around enough. I met enough really awesome people and people in the industry and asked questions until they told me to go away and leave them alone. And eventually I was in depth enough to meet Todd and Susie Ford, who were tired of doing their careers, and they had met me a couple times through the home brewing groups, and eventually my name came around enough times as someone who would be crazy enough to jump in for this sort of adventure, and yeah, they came up and asked me at the Flying Saucer one day, and I jumped up and screamed a bunch of expletives and said yes. So,
thank you. We're all glad that you did.
Exactly right.
Hey.
That's a great point. That's amazing.
Julia's got another question for us, or perhaps just a comment. Amazing snacks and beer. This is the perfect date night idea. Cheers. I believe that's 1,000% accurate. If I had a date, this would be a heck of a lot better than watching whatever's on Netflix.
That's right.
It's a great thing to do for sure.
Killer. Awesome. Cool, guys. Well, I mean, these beers, obviously, they're excellent. I'm having a blast. And I bet a few of you, or maybe all of you by now at home, are wondering, hey, how do you actually make these tasty libations? You're in luck. Chad is actually going to take us on a tour of the brewery right now. You don't even need to leave your home. Just stick around. And then after that, we're going to be tasting lager days. Woohoo.
Yes.
So we're on a street side now at NoDa Brewing Company on North Tryon. As you can see, we got some shiny tanks outside of the brewery, and these tanks are really important for us because they held our base grain, which is barley. Barley is basically how you define beer from other alcoholic beverages. It's fermented sugars from this barley, so it's super important for us. We have silos filled with American barley and also silo filled with Maris Otter, which is from England. Now we will use that grain to be the source of our main sugar extraction for most of our beers, or actually for all of our beers, and we'll mix them with other specialty grains as well. We pipe those grains up into the side of the wall here. We put them into the system where all the magic happens. So let's go check out the system where all the science converges. So welcome to one of my favorite parts of the entire brew house, the brew house. A lot of people call the building itself a brew house, but this is the actual brew house itself because this is where a lot of the ingredients meet each other. This is where our grain from outside and also our specialty grain that we hand mill in all get mixed in with hot water, and we create a lot of really cool scientific principles like enzymatic reactions to be able to free up a bunch of sugars that are in the grains so that we can put them into a liquid solution that is facilitated by the water that we call wort, W-O-R-T, not what grows on your skin, W-A-R-T, but wort is an old English word meaning root because it's the root of what will become the alcoholic beverage at the end point of it. The wort is essentially the sugar fluid extraction from the grain. Now we have a very intricate system here. This is a 60-barrel brew house. Now when I say barrel, that doesn't mean like a physical wine barrel. It's actually an old English unit that we measure all of our product in. One barrel is 31 gallons. When we started out just down the road almost 10 years ago, we started out on a 15-barrel brew house with much less vessels to work with than this one. This one is a 60, so we went from about 500 gallons of finished product to about 2,000 gallons of finished product. It takes us about 7 hours to go from when the grain hits the water to when we can push the wort into the next stage of its process. But we basically have each tank here is dedicated to a specific process. Our back left tank, known as our mash mixer, is used to mix the mash, which is the combination of our grain and the combination of hot water to get that enzyme action going on so that we can get those sugars from the grain. That takes about an hour in total to let that enzyme interaction happen. And we pump the entire slurry over to the back right tank that we call the lauter tun. The lauter tun's whole job is to basically act as a big filter to separate the physical mash matter or the grain bits from the loose wort fluid. So we'll basically slowly lauter or separate the wort fluid from the grain matter, and it will go to our front right vessel here called the bowl kettle, where we, guess what, boil it. The spent grain that we call now that has got all the wort sucked out of it actually gets pumped to a silo outside, and we give that to farmers so they can supplement feed for their cattle here locally. The bowl kettle will boil the wort usually for about 60 to 90 minutes, depending on what beer we have, and that is where a lot of our hops go in. Now, hops are a really big fan favorite ingredient, but they're actually not essential for making the alcoholic beverage. They're just a normal cultural staple that we have now. They do give you some shelf stability, and for all those big IPA lovers out there, of course, they give you the bitterness and a lot of that hop flavor and aroma. We use a ton of different varieties of hops from all over the world. We actually go out to multiple locations to hand select them every year, and we treat them just like the rest of our ingredients with the highest amount of respect because they contribute a huge amount of flavor for us. So depending on where we put the hops during the boil, they can give different characteristics such as bitterness or flavor. And once the boil is done, we shoot the wort at an angle into this tank that I'm standing right in front of called the whirlpool, where guess what? The wort whirlpools. When we shoot it in at an angle, it basically spins in the tank, And through the boil, you're going to get coagulated proteins, and you have little bits of hot matter and whatnot floating in there. We don't want that solid matter to come with us to the next stage. So the whirlpool causes a centrifugal action to happen, making all those solid bits mound up in the middle and sink down to the bottom in a solid matter waste product that we call trube. The clean wort is sitting all around it, and through little side ports, we progressively walk down, sucking the clean fluid wort, leaving the mess behind, and we go through our heat exchanger, which cools the wort down. We cool the wort down to different temperatures, but basically we want to put it to a temperature that's comfortable for our yeast that we're going to use, that's going to eat all those wort sugars and convert them into delicious alcohol. So depending on what temperature that yeast likes, we'll change the frequency of the flow for the heat exchanger, and it's going to come out here and then be piped on to the next part of our production, which is the cellar. That's where a lot of the magic happens, and we hopefully did a good job as cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, as brewers, and prepared the best dish of food for our yeast to then devour and make our final product of beer for us. So let's go check that out. So after we're done brewing the wort, we have to give it up to our good friends, the yeast. All these fermenters here are what we call our cellar. We have a variety of tank sizes here, all ranging in increments of 60 barrels. So basically however many times we can fit a house brew into it. We have 6 240 barrel fermenters. We have a 180 barrel fermenter. We just recently expanded and added several of these 120 barrel fermenters as well. And we have 60 barrel fermenters. So basically everything's in a 60 barrel unit. We put the wort/sugar wort into one of these tanks that looks like a big ice cream cone. And here, Saccharomyces yeast, which is yeast that really likes saccharin byproduct, which is what we just made in the wort, are going to eat that sugar and they're going to excrete alcohol. The alcohol is going to stay saturated in the wort and become beer, and there's also going to be CO2 that gets released, and that's what we see right here. So this is a happily fermenting beer right here. This is actually radio haze. As you can see in this little sanitary bucket, we have gas blow off. So that's the yeast actively converting that wort sugar into alcohol. This process can take anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on if it's an ale or a lager or a really strong beer or a really weak beer. But basically, this is where we go from sugar water to beer. And after this is finished up and passes all of our checks in our lab, we move it into a packaging tank, and then we package it up on the canning line or kegging line so we can send it to you and enjoy the hard work that we just did on it. Thank you guys for joining me in the brew house and cellar. Let's go check out what the canning line's doing. So behind me is our packaging line, or our canning line if you want to call it that. Basically, after we're done transferring the finished product of beer into the packaging tanks, we can choose to either keg it into half barrel or 6 barrel kegs that go out to draft lines, or we send it over to the packaging line, which just takes up quite a good bit of our volume. This is where we actually package the beer into 16-ounce cans. We have over half of our production staff actually works tirelessly in running the can, packaging out all the different pallets, storing them, and then of course doing all the maintenance and cleanup of it. It's really labor intensive, but we work really hard to make sure that we put all the beer that we worked really hard to make in the best product that we can get, so that when you buy the can of beer, that it's as good of a representation of what we made in the actual tanks itself. So let's go on over and see the next part of our QA and QC, which is the lab. And Anthony is our head of our lab. He is the head of all the different intangibles that we have to account for and different variables to make sure that each beer is up to the highest qualitative standard that we can account for. So let's go talk to Anthony. How's it going, Anthony?
Oh, hey, man. What's up?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Anthony Proctor. He's our lab head here and the head of our QA/QC program at NoDa Brewing Company to make sure our beers stay consistent as we can make them. Therefore, you taste more consistent beer. So you want to give them a little rundown on what you go through for day-to-day checks, kind of starting from the fermentation process on?
Yeah, sure. What Chad caught me doing, you guys caught me doing here, is I'm about to perform a cell count, so I want to make sure that the yeast is happy and healthy and doing what it's supposed to do, which is basically turning the sugar water, which I think Chad covered that with you. I did. Turning that sugar water into beer, which is why we're all here. But yeah, every process, every step of the way, we're doing checks on the beer, from checking the gravity, making sure that the sugar content is going down, alcohol content is going up, to, like I said, cell counts, to sensory. We're tasting the beer at every step. Yes, we drink beer for a living. It's hard work, but
it's not always the most fun thing when it's not ready.
That is true. That is true.
We also do a lot of quantification with a lot of tools, as you see around here. So Anthony's well versed in the various products that we have to not only allow us to monitor, the progress of the beer, but also to map and quantify trends that the beers are going through. So when we have beers that we repeat either seasonally or year round, we can kind of see if they're going the same direction for the previous successes and whatnot. But it doesn't stop there though, right? We also check them when they're also going on packaging.
No, right. I mean, once the beer is done fermenting, we go through a few checks to make sure it's ready to transfer to packaging, whether that's the keg or the can. So for instance, over here, we have a nice device that helps us check the amount of oxygen that's in the beer. Before beer is beer, oxygen is very good. After it's beer, oxygen is bad. It'll make your beer taste like cardboard or paper. So we want to make sure that we've got the proper, readings on that to make sure we don't have too much oxygen in there. Another thing we do, we have an incubator back here. We take our cans and put it in there, hold it at 30°C. It's about 86 degrees. That'll hold that for about a week, and then we'll do a sensory on it. We'll taste it. We'll see how our beer is going to taste in about a month and a half, roughly. It force ages the beer.
Yeah, the warmer the beer sits, the faster it ages, essentially.
Yeah, correct.
So
So that way, again, we have a good idea of the shelf stability of our beer, and also if there's anything in there that we don't want to be in there, we can catch it early before it's too late, kind of thing. So yeah. Over here we've got we're going to do some microbiological testing. We're looking for beer spoilers, any kind of bug that might be in there that's not going to hurt you. A pathogen cannot live in beer, but it's going to could spoil the beer, make it taste not like beer, not like we want it to, not like you want it to. So we're going to run those kinds of tests. But yeah, that's kind of it around the horn here.
Yeah. And then so all those processes happen to every single beer we do, whether it's the first time we ever brewed the beer, or whether it's a small little tiny batch, or it's a beer that we do year round and is done 240 barrels at a time. And speaking of beer, I'm thirsty for the next one. So let's hop over to the next can to crack open. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.
Cheers.
All right.
Cheers. Cheers.
We're back mid sip. That was so cool. Getting a look behind the scenes there. Obviously, we've come a long way from beer being or fermented beverages being Vikings throwing some honey in a pot and hoping for the best. Yeah. So that was really cool, though, to see the QC and everything that's actually involved in making sure this tastes as great as it does, bringing us right into the next beer. So
yeah, man.
Yeah, so Lager Days. This, I got to say, so I discovered this beer in my local Lowe's like 3 weeks ago. I walked up to the shelf and I was like, whoa, NoDa has a new lager. And I was like, are those 16-ounce cans? Is that a 4-pack? And I walked closer and was like, is that an 18? I kept getting better and better, discovering the beer was bigger and there was more of it. I admit it, sounded as good as it did. So enough talking about it, though. This is crisp and delicious, but let's kind of talk, instead of me, you, Chad, kind of tell us a little more about lagers. I guess we can start. So we've had ale so far. We've had a Goza. We had a hazy IPA. Now we're on to lagers. What's kind of like the difference, high level, between ales and lagers?
In a nutshell, you basically have two different types of families of Saccharomyces, which is the grander family of all the different yeast. Your ale yeast tend to top ferment, as in when they get all together and they start feeding, they're on usually the top of the vessel and churn away and all that sort of stuff. On the lager side, they usually are on the lower part of the vessel, so they're bottom fermenting. Another implication of what that means is that the ales tend to like warmer temperatures of around the 60s to low 70s on average. And they ferment fairly quickly. They can tend to put off other smaller byproducts, such as esters and phenols, which are like fruity and spicy and stuff like that. And therefore, their styles tend to kind of play on to that. So that's why you see like big, dark, roasty beers or fruited beers and wheat beers and hoppy beers and all that sort of stuff. They kind of like ride the train of like, these guys are aggressive, they're flavor forward. Like, let's go ahead and like make a lot out of this whole yeast situation. On the lager side, though, they're slow fermenting. They ferment over a longer period of time, and they benefit over a sorry about the siren going over.
It's the first one.
Location.
Yeah, exactly. So lagers ferment at a colder temperature. They usually like, I mean, it's not a massive difference. You're looking at like the mid to high 60s versus the mid to low 50s, so sometimes high 40s. But they benefit from a low cold storing or lagering, which is where their name comes from, usually around 40 degrees after they're done fermenting. But what this allows them to do is make a super clean fermentation, and in my opinion, actually gives you like a lot more nuance to play with. Their flavors are way more nuanced, but they tend to showcase like the raw awesomeness of each ingredient that you use in it. So like with this beer, it's predominantly German Pilsner malt, right? Which is clean and crackery and has like this subtle bready sweetness to it. It has a touch of wheat in it just for the sake of like lighting the body a little bit. And also some carafoam, which essentially helps give it a little bit of lacing, a little bit of mouthfeel accentuation. The hops that are using are also German and European in nature for very clean bitterness, a subtle floral character, and then we use a really cool hop called Saphir. It looks like sapphire, but the E's cut off. We throw that, and it's a small amount, into the whirlpool just to give a little bit of like a brighter floral characteristic on the aroma and flavor. It's very subtle, it's super nuanced, but it just is to elevate the other characteristics of the beer itself. And I use a really crisp lagering yeast for it as well. That's actually usually reserved for pilsners, which is also a drier style of lager in general. So what you end up getting is like this like showcase of this very basic but also very nicely developed Pilsner malt with subtle hops to accent it on this really clean sort of a beer. And I think that's kind of like a new wave of appreciations coming out in the beer world, is like with these lagers, if you just pay enough attention to making sure every little part of the process is done right and you have the patience to let it lager out for up to a month and a half or so before you package it, you can get this super crisp and clean, but still nuance level wise, like complex beer, but not like what you would have for an ale. Like there's like IPAs are the most popular craft beer for a reason. There's a ton of different hop varieties. You get a ton of different flavor combinations out of them. They're not subtle about it at all, but there's something beautiful about the subtleties of the nuance of just letting a nice clean fermentation, a nice traditional grain done just really nice, slow and easy. And that's pretty much what Lager Days is. It's an all occasion beer. And it kind of inadvertently became a celebration of us being able to be available in all the Carolinas. Like the idea of this beer was to be something that is a go-to if you're hiking, a go-to if you're going to a friend's barbecue, a go-to if you're hanging out at the pool, a go-to if you're going to go to the beach. And so basically it was like from the mountains to the sea, doesn't matter where you are, you can enjoy this sort of beer. And it just so happens to be released when we finalize being available in all the Carolinas from the mountains to the sea. And its Lager Days comes off of that idea too. Actually, it was pitching to our marketing guys. I was like, whatever we end up naming this beer, its slogan should just be every day's a Lager Days. It's all occasion. Yes. Doesn't matter what the occasion is. Any day can be a Lager Day. And we end up running it with this Lager Days. It's not taken. So let's go with that. So that's kind of, it's kind of the serendipitous, just like all the things formed together. I've never been afraid or not wanted to brew lagers beforehand. And I really like them as a style as a whole. We actually last year won silver in Maibach, actually, for our Maibach that we did, which was the first time I had ever brewed that style in general. Wow. Which is a little like self-promotion, but I
take it though. That's awesome.
I was so excited about it, and the gold was Chuckanut, which they crush that style all the time. So good for them. But to be in that listing, especially after never doing that beer before, was pretty awesome. So we've been doing lagers on and off for a while, but we wanted to have something that was a year-round, dependable, flavorful, but also easy drinking sort of a beer. It is also gluten reduced. So it does then add the extra appeal of anyone who has that sort of concern. But it's just a beer style that I think that if you on as face value, there's nothing that's super flashy about it. But that's kind of its point. It's not supposed to be. It's not trying to steal the show. It's trying to be an essential part of what makes the event that you're going to or the part of the day that you're trying to enjoy even better.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. I love that. Whether I'm like coming off of the beach after swimming all day or hiking through the mountains, like there's nothing better than a crisp, cold lager. It's like the best beer you'll ever have in your life when you're tired from just running around in the sun all day. And This is like, right now, this is going to just be in the pack next to me wherever I mountains or sea, wherever I might be imbibing. This is awesome.
Thank you so much. And it is kind of a hybrid of an American lager concept and like a pseudo German Helles.
Right.
But
I was going to say,
I kind of designed it more so to like the Helles idea without going so malt forward, because Helles's can kind of get a little extra malt sweet. But I wanted the malt to still be like the main focus on it, just never go past that teetering point of being a malt forward beer. But I also didn't want to use like rice or adjunct sugars or anything like that, like you typically find with like American light lagers. So it kind of rides that middle between the two. And ultimately it just comes down to like, it's like, what style is it? It's our lager. You know, it's our any occasion, crush it lager sort of thing. So I do love the style guidelines being for what they are, but sometimes it's just nice to just be like, it's a lager, make it what it is, you know, make it what you need it to be. So it's our Swiss Army knife of a beer, so to speak.
Thank goodness.
Ooh, here's a awesome question. This is one I'm so glad to see it come up in the feed. So Russell asks for you, Chad, of course, what was the beer that kind of took you and pivoted you into like a beer nerd? Like what was the beer that opened up that world for you, if you recall one or two?
The first craft beer that I drank that became the first beer that I liked was when I was in college. And a friend of mine had brought in, when he was back home, he brought, I don't think it was Tire Biter was what it was called at the time. It was Flying Dog's Tire Biter. I think it was a Kolsch. And like at that point, I was just like, you know, like, it's a beer, whatever. And I drank it, I was like, that's actually really nice. That actually tastes good. And I'm not left with, you know, what I had like attributed to the typical beer flavor in my mouth. The thing that made me question, like, what's going on with this was a Founder's Breakfast Stout that like 6 months later, a friend of mine, again, came back to college. Again, like this wasn't available in the state. They're like, try this. And I'm like, why is it black? And they're like, it's a breakfast stout. I'm like, what does that mean? And I drank it. And I was like, this is insane. It's like chocolate and coffee. And like, what is going on with this? It was like, and they're like, it's craft beer, man. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, it's more expensive and it's harder to get. And I was like, that's not a definition. And so that's literally when I jumped in. And I like the thing that actually got me. I was in my dorm and I typed in Founder's Breakfast Stout, and the first website I clicked on happened to be Beer Advocate. And then I was like, and it was like just the endless like amount of information and references and ratings. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a big wormhole compared to what I thought it was going to be. But that was the beer that got me questioning. I don't think there was a single beer that really turned me into a beer nerd. I think just the realization that it was such a bigger industry than it was just sucked me in all at one point. But those are the two beers. One that like made me not like write off beer was Tire Biter. I think it's now called Tire Bite, actually. From Flying Dog, you know, Founder's Breakfast Stout was that made me just ask, like, why? You know, what's going on with this?
Right.
And for what it's worth, for making me a hophead, it's no longer made, and I hate that it's no longer made, but New Holland's Exequential, I think is what it was called. It was back when New Holland used to do bombers, and they were just one color label on it. So like Pilgrim's Dole, Mad Hatter, those sorts of beers. Like they made a double IPA that was Existential. And it had a big green hop on it. And I didn't know it at the time, but every time I bought a pale ale or an IPA, I was buying a super old one. And every time I bought an IPA, I was like, it's just bitter and just tastes weird. I don't like it. I didn't realize at the time that it was probably not anywhere close to being fresh. And it just so happened that someone had a one of these from New Holland, and I tried that. And I was like, oh my God, it's like citrus rind and pine. And they're like, yeah. That's what IPAs usually taste like. And so that's where I paid attention. And then I became this huge hophead. So and then after that, you just, you know, there's a couple of books worth of notes of just writing down from everything else. So there's not one thing that turned me into it, but there was a couple of experiences that definitely knocked me into being a full-fledged craft beer nerd.
That's great.
No.
All right, got another question from John. Cock Toastin, a fan of Fletch and other funny Chevy Chase movies. Love it. Says, what's your favorite non-NoDa beer right now?
Ooh. I'll give a huge shout out for a brewery that's really close to where me and my wife live up in North Charlotte. We go to them fairly frequently. They do usually a really consistent job, but Armored Cow Brewing up in the university area of Charlotte do one of the best made Hefeweizens I have ever had, and it's called Fun 51. And it is just like, it's like if you could write a novella of what a Hefeweizen should be,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that just kind of wing them out. They're like, it's our wheat beer. Put it on the right yeast. Make it hot. Make it taste like fake bananas, and whatever. It will fill the void out. But the level of nuance and care and like layers of flavor on that beer was just like the bananas was so subtle. It had like roasted pear and subtle clove and all the things that you want to have off of a really well-made Hefeweizen. And like I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but if you drink a not so careful to detail Hefeweizen, and you drink it kind of like in a big chew or a large gulp, there's almost like a tinny astringency that comes out of the back end of it. Because people keep trying to throw too much, have too much yeast left in it or whatever, or various reasons. I was trying to get something to happen with this beer, let it get warmed up, and it's still just absolutely fantastic as a Hefeweizen. So right now, that's like probably one of the things I hype up the most. Actually, I started doing a show and tell thing here at the brewery where as people have availability in the lab, I'll bring like a non-NoDa beer in and be like, hey, these guys are doing this really awesome. Or, hey, we don't do this style, but these guys are doing a really good job of it. And that was the very first beer I brought in. I was like, we don't have a Hefeweizen now. We brewed them before, but we haven't brewed one in a while. And I was like, this is what this style should taste like. And one, it kind of also gives like, it's me going like, if you get the chance, go check them out, sort of like, passing the buck on to another brewery that's doing a good job. But also, there's a lot of younger guys that work here and, have cut their teeth on our IPAs and stuff like that, or other breweries' IPAs, and they didn't take the time to appreciate a style like a Hefeweizen, and it's like, I don't have any style I dislike, and I can appreciate a well-done any sort of style. And when you run across ones that have been around for so long and so many people are aware of them that they can almost be made like, almost, I don't want to say lazily because there's nothing lazy about this process, but there's a lot of people that just go through the motions of making some beers just to fill a menu slot or something like that. But then you run across one that's that style that doesn't have a lot of play in what you can do with it as far as recipe design, and they just knock it out of the park. You have to tip the hat to that.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic. Wow, cool. I love me a good Hef, so that's all to put it on my list.
There you go.
Yet one day, Chad is going to be someone else's Sam Calagione. And the circle of Charlotte area beer will continue to get stronger, and I'll be excited at that because I also live in North Carolina. So for those of you following along at home or drinking along at home, remember that the next virtual beer hunting takes place on May 15th, and we're going to be heading to Edmonds Oast Brewery. You won't want to miss that. Visit your beer den starting on May 1st, and you'll be able to pick up another box like this full of Edmonds Oast beers and hopefully more snacks. Stick around because when we come back from this, the fun is going to continue with a beer I'm really excited to taste called Radio Haze.
Con los terroristas.
And do the Harlem Shake.
Con los terroristas.
Axes down! Lumberjacks, timbermen, axe wielders, welcome to the first annual meeting of the Mecklenburg branch of America Lumberjacks Association, and I now call it to order. My name is Francois. I'm the Supreme Chancellor of Forestry and Axemen Wieldmanship.
You know what you boys would like to order tonight?
Oh, yes. Can I get a large order of the hotcakes? Double hot.
Alright.
Can I get a side of just the little hotcakes? Kind of that. Just, like 4 or 5 of them stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
And that'd be it.
All right, we'll have that right out for you guys.
Thank you. All right, as my first order of business in today's delegation, I suggest that at the beginning of every meeting, we start with hotcakes. Hey, by a show of axes, who agrees? Axes in the air. Wrong. I disagree.
Yes, I disagree. You see, gentlemen, and Erica? Yes, hot cakes are fantastic. They're delicious. In fact, they're staples of our lumberjack diets. But I think we're missing out on something that could even be better. Why just have hot cakes when you can have hop cakes?
That's right. Hop Cakes is NoDa Brewing's double IPA at 10% alcohol and calculated 114 IBUs. So it's some huge hop aroma, but they get all their color and all their sweet flavors, not from specialty grains, but just from maple syrup. So while you think that hot cakes are a superior, delicious treat, I think you should consider Hop Cakes.
Yeah, man, I'd sell my panic ticket for this stuff. It's super heady beer, man. About bloody time!
So it's unanimous. We're heading down to NoDa this Tuesday for Hop Cakes, their notable release. Consider yourselves notified.
He's a witch!
Cheers and welcome back, everyone. Hopcakes, man, I'm ready for those to come on my plate and my cup again. Anyways, Radio Haze in the beer den glass. We're finally at the 6% threshold. These are the beers that I don't know if I could say I cut my teeth on, but I'm excited. We're drinking in New England. I want to hear Chad's description of a New England and where they came from, and maybe even why they're so popular. But welcome back. And Chad, please tell me about this beer, because I am really pumped about Radio Haze.
To like full disclosure, Radio Haze is my number one drink beer right now for the past year or so that we've had it out. It's our second best selling beer too, for that matter. So it's only been around for about a year, and it's already our second best seller, which speaks volumes to the beer. I did about a year and a quarter's worth of research on making this beer. So almost every hazy we made for a solid year. We make a new beer every week, by the way, for those that don't know. So all my test batches that was a hazy that came out in various names were all just R&D batches that led to Radio Haze. My quest on this beer was to do a juicy hazy, also known as a New England. There's kind of a little bit of like an argument between what qualifies XYZ. The official style is called juicy hazy, just same way that American IPA is what it's officially called and not called West Coast, because they don't want to differentiate that you have to be from a certain region. But the hazy juicy / New England did originate in New England. The first one that really made it super apparent was probably Heady Topper. And they actually used to put on the can, like, don't pour this into a glass, drink straight from the can to preserve like aroma. Because at the time, if you had any sort of haze in your IPA, people were sending it back immediately.
Right.
And I think they kind of accidentally stumbled upon this idea that with the right combination of yeast, right combination of certain types of protein use in the grain, and then the right type of dry hopping profile, you can make these super hazy, retentive, very juicy experiences that we weren't really used to at that time. People just weren't able to pull these sorts of flavors out of hops. And that led to this whole charge of like, let's make it orange juice with alcohol in it, sort of thing. And I had a hard time wrapping my head around it because I mean we used to get kegs of our IPA, which will be the one following after this, sent back all the time if the first pour had a slight hint of haze to it. And I was like, this is crazy. People are now like foaming at the mouth for these foam beers. But I was drinking some that really were amazing. I drank some that I didn't like at all and had chalkiness and would sediment out and whatnot. I was like, there's got to be a science to why some of these are unbelievable and then some of them are just not. And I was like, I got to figure it out. And so we started brewing a few of them and going by what everyone was writing about them, everyone was posting about it. And then I just started actually just delving into research from actual people at like Hops Institutes, actually people is Sapporo in Japan. And with the University of Oregon, where they were actually doing like really nano style extrapolations of what's going on in these hazies and whatnot. And after, especially like Dr. John Paul May, if there's any homebrewers out there that want to see really detailed analysis of how to work in the hop constructs of the hazy IPA, Dr. John Paul May is the man. He has so much information on how to orchestrate the different nuances and everything. And basically from going to seminars and doing research on their papers that they wrote about it, Radio Haze was eventually born. And the whole idea of Radio Haze was to not just make a really good, juicy, hazy New England IPA, but to make one that wasn't going to break the bank. Because at the time, everyone would just throw an absurd amount of hops in it. You'd yield very poor yielding on it. And therefore, like every 4-pack was $25 or something like that. And I was like, that's not sustainable. Like you can do those occasionally, but like you're not going to make it massive. And you look at, I really respected Sierra Nevada's hazy little thing that was able to make a really good, consistent product that you could find everywhere for a relatively cheap price. I was like, let's make our version, not a flavor like representation, but let's make our hazy little thing for the NoDa market, so to speak. And so I wanted to find out what I needed to have, what I wanted to have, and what I could set in to be like, we can price this the same as our main year-round IPA and still deliver, an awesome product that didn't break the bank. And basically from the usage of Citra, Mosaic, Centennial, and Chinook, and the right sorts of procedures with it, it ended up with Radio Haze. And what's great with this and all of our hazies, actually, including the Haze Solo that we drank earlier, this is centrifuged, 100%.
Huh.
So when you do it the right way with the science behind it and all, you're going to make a beer still look like pineapple juice and centrifuge it, and it comes out looking like pineapple juice because all this haze is actually polyphenol haze. You can put a coaster on this, set it on your windowsill or wherever you want, and a week later you won't have any sedimentation of it, or if it is, it's super, super minor. So that was basically what I was going through, is trying to make a beer super consistent, really tasty, hit all those notes that I wanted to with the hops that we had available, and develop available on a wide scale and also be in a reasonable price range for us. And that's basically how Radio Haze came about. The name of it actually is because we've had a long-term relationship with a local radio station here, and a morning show with them is Woody and Wilcox. And Woody has a beer club. And so he's been a great fan and partner with us through multiple different beer styles and whatnot. And we wanted to still pay an ode to them. But we have, that's why if you look at the can, it does say Woody and Wilcox Show on it. But the idea it's like let's just do a Radio Haze, because Haze says that it's a hazy, and it's kind of like the static of just a bunch of different stuff coming in all at one time. So it's a really awesome pineapple-y, citrusy, obviously sort of beer, but it's not hit you over the head, but it's also not faint either. And it's got this great mouthfeel. And I do use a little bit of first wort kettle hops in to give it a little bit of a biter pop at the end of it, which I personally like. I like having a little bit of a bitter send-off for just about any beer. But I do love hazies that have this huge upfront aroma, but I still want to have something to clip at the end of it. So I like the fact that it does have a touch of bitter character.
Now we're talking about Brett IPAs to get. No, I won't even open that. Y'all, we got a lot of activity in the YouTube feed, Chad. So I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask you, but I'm going to let Caitlin open it up. And she comes in. She's asking if Radio Haze is your number 2 bestseller. Okay, what's number 1?
Be patient, and you'll see it soon.
That's right.
Soon. It's the next beer. It's the next beer. Be patient. It's the one beer you haven't opened in the pack. It's Hop Drop.
Hopefully at this point.
Yeah. So it's Hop Drop and Rolls are number 1. Yeah.
All right, Derek's loving it. Derek. Yes, thank you, Derek.
I agree. It's a sad day when I run out of my fridge.
So here's a question from John Fisher. He's a category manager at Lowe's Foods. And so he says everyone's on the hazy IPA trend right now. Where do you see this progressing in the craft category? Like, what's the next big thing? I got your answer right here, Josh. It's the lager. No, it's probably not. Chad, what do you think is the next big craze in the craft beer industry after hazy?
Well, honestly, I actually slightly agree with you that lager might be the thing that has a resurgence. I think that almost everything runs on a slightly cyclical manner. Because the IPA kind of just came back after. I mean, if you look at the original IPAs before they got on a boat and went around to India, they were very similar to the recipes that you see today being brewed. They were very clean on malt. A lot of people think that they're just English IPAs. The English IPA is kind of like a newer fabrication of that concept. But I don't. The thing is I don't think we're gonna see another IPA or hazy IPA hit the market like they have. I think you're gonna see the surge of people wanting to have a lager more often, because I think so I think that the craft lager concept is coming in full swing because one, people are getting hopped out. Two, people can only take so much sour before their stomach starts to just like reject everything. And three, because people have evolved enough to where they, especially in the craft beer world, and the people that are really pushing a lot of the numbers for the craft beer industry, they've evolved to be able to taste and appreciate a lot of the nuances that well-made craft lagers deliver. And they are the opposite of the hop world. So I think that you had this big surge in sours a few years ago because when everyone could try to say like we have 15 million IBUs in our IPA, they're like that's still not enough. You can't give me enough flavor. And then the sour's like, but we can go tart. And then everyone's like, well, I can get sour now. And then after a while, it's like, they did everything they could do with the tart train. And now, like after the palate fatigue is worn out, I think people can actually appreciate some of the nuances in lager. I don't think you're gonna see it boom like IPAs or hazies or anything like that. But until someone comes up with another way of iterating the hop complexities, I don't know if there's going to be another major thing in the IPA world to push out through. The thing that makes hazy so amazing for me as a brewer is all that biotransformations talk that we just talked about. It adds another layer to what else can you do with the hops. And like I said, as of last March, they were discovering entire new categories of compounds that impact the flavor that you can utilize in the beer. Now, to the consumer, that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but that does mean that they grab one that tastes unique enough to the other hazies. They're like, oh, wow, I really like what they're doing with this. And then us in the industry, you're like, well, what did that person do? And then we try to start figuring out, how to replicate that and everything. Just like with Haze Solo really rides polyfunctional thiols, it also rides the whole idea of it being a health conscious one. So is that beer going to be our number one selling beer in a month? I mean, it'd be great if it did. I mean, I always number one selling beer, but I don't think that style would be necessarily the new big boom. But I think that as long as you put diversity out there, the crowd will select. For a while there, we thought it was going to be milkshake IPAs,
right?
And thankfully, if you're talking about fighting the beer gut, thankfully doing milkshake IPAs is not the biggest thing to do. But they again are an option. So you throw out all the options, you see what people are going to go crazy for and everything. A lot of people are thinking that the Kveik yeast or the Kveik yeast is actually two different ways you could say it. The KVEIK yeast was going to be a new thing, and that had a buzz behind it, but it's really not picking up traction. So I think as long as we're just being creative, something's going to come out of it, or we're going to get a resurfacing of something like traditional lagers. I would love my box to be the next big thing. I absolutely love my box, and
you're pretty good at them.
Right.
It's coming out soon too. Actually, we have that release in a couple weeks. But we scaled it up a little bit this time. But also, I think that Belgian styles are due in at some point, and some nuance of Belgians. Like I personally have always been a massive fan of triples or tripels. Everyone said, I'm like, it's whatever. But or
9% banana juice. Yes, yeah. I'm here for it.
I think the only thing that's holding those down is their high ABV.
Right.
Because if you look at what everyone likes in a hazy, that's not that far off from what everyone describes a tripel as being. So I would love for those to come to. I'm a huge Belgian beer fan. The only reason we don't brew more of them is it's just the sales are never that crazy on. The very first packaged item we ever did was a triple called Triumphant, and we sold that. And it's got people that get excited about it, but what a lot of people don't understand is that they are the ones that are going to decide what the next big trend is.
Right.
Like you buying something over and over again and telling your friends to buy that thing, that's what makes us brew that thing. So I want every opportunity to be every single type of beer on the planet and innovate different stuff as well. But at the end of the day, we're still a business. We still have to we only have so many tanks. We have a lot of tanks now, but we only have so much room.
Right.
So we have to dedicate them to what makes sense for what we need to push out. So I'm hoping that lagers make a resurgence and become a higher demand beer. And I think that's kind of where things are moving, as being the new big thing you have to have.
I love it. I hope so. All right, what's next? All right, so Trish Anna something. First taste of NoDa beers, and I am very pleased with each we've tasted thus far. I love a solid IPA, but I'm partial to stouts and porters. Anything coming soon, or can you point me in the right direction? I'm assuming on the stout and porter front. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you very much, Trish. I appreciate it. We do have a year-round porter. It's called Coco Loco. It didn't make it into this pack, but we have, I think, 6 year-round beers. The porter is one of them, and then we are always having multiple seasonals, whether they're seasonality beers or they're the rotating Goza or a rotating IPA. Right now in the summer, dark beers aren't really the huge go-to, but we do keep Coco Loco around as a year-round beer. So that beer usually does pretty well for us over the summer, because if you are a dark beer fan, you can depend to go to it. It is a robust porter. That was our very first medal win at JBF when we were 11 months old. We won silver for the JBF for robust porter, and there was no gold awarded. So we kind of say that we won gold in it, but unofficially. But it has a little bit of coconut and cocoa nibs in it, so that's why we kind of call it Coco Loco. It's coconut nibs, but the coconut really comes out like subtly. The cocoa nibs give a nice dark chocolate character to it, but it's a really nice robust porter. It sits at like 6.3% alcohol, and it's an awesome year-rounder beer for it. So if you can find that, from us at least, I know that's a go-to. It's just when you're coming into the hotter months, the dark beers are just a little harder to find.
Right. I love that beer. I remember the first time I had it at a food truck event in Wilmington, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. It was like 2 weeks after moving to North Carolina. I was like, they make these kind of beers down here? And it was a hot day, and I was like, this is kind of like a coconut iced coffee. This is amazing.
There you go.
And I rolled with it. So I'm glad we got to talk about that beer today. And it's hard to believe, guys, that we only have one beer left. Before we get to that, let's hear from Susie Ford, the president and co-founder of NoDa Brewing, and Charles Lezak. He's the director of beverages at Lowe's Foods. And we'll be back in a few with Hop, Drop, and Roll.
Yeah.
My name is Charles Slazak, a director of beverages here at Lowe's Foods. I'm with Susie Ford, president and co-founder of NoDa Brewing. We're having a little beverage together.
Cheers. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, Susie, I'm drinking Hop Drop, which is a delicious IPA.
Thank you.
I'll always be an IPA fan. But you're drinking something else.
Yes, I'm drinking Valencia Pale Ale, our citrus ale, which is amazing.
Yum.
Yeah.
Now, this was one of the first beers that I tried from your brewery, and I got hooked. And I understand there's a fun story that goes
There
along.
is. My husband was a home brewer from the early 90s and was flying to the West Coast and enjoying a lot of their West Coast style IPAs. Would fly back home, couldn't get a good one over here, so he decided to make one. Fast forward, we opened the brewery, and in 2014, April, we submitted it to the World Beer Cup and won gold in its category, which was pretty exciting. Put us on the map, and we have just been going strong ever since.
World Beer Cup is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Huge. So you guys just I'm gonna go ahead and submit it?
Yeah, we didn't think we were gonna win. We only got one ticket to the award ceremony, so we sent Chad, and we were at a bar drinking, and the bartenders came and told us, and we didn't believe them, and it was kind of surreal.
Wow.
So pretty exciting.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
By the way.
Thank you.
By the way. So now there are more people in the Carolinas that get to enjoy your beers recently with a little expansion and distribution, right?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, actually before the pandemic, we were in the process of purchasing several more 240 barrel tanks, fermenting tanks. During the pandemic, there was a couple of breweries that the founders decided to retire, and we had the we were fortunate enough to pick up some tanks that were in great shape, and which you guys probably saw when you were back there. Our 3-year plan was to be all over the Carolinas, North and South Carolinas, not really go anywhere else, but focus on the Carolinas. And we decided in October, why are we waiting? We have the tank space, we have the fermentation capacity, we have amazing beer. Why are we going to wait 3 years? So we started interviewing distributors, and with the acquisition of Myrtle Beach, we are statewide in both North and South Carolina.
Wow.
Very exciting.
Well, that warms my heart because we feel like we were born and raised in the Carolinas, as are you.
Yeah, and you're a huge part why we were known before we even were throughout the Carolinas, because your beer run. You would come and pick up the beer and bring it to all the stores. I know we loved it when we would go to the beach and we'd go pick up our beer at the coast, and it was so neat.
It was a lot of fun.
It was.
So thank you. You were the first person I called when we were kicking this idea around.
Yeah.
Say, what do you think about me picking up some of your beer? You're like, I think we can do it. Let's figure it out.
Yeah.
So, that was a long time ago.
It was. It's been a lot of fun.
So what would you tell some of the people that maybe haven't tried some of your beers before?
Wow. The great thing is we have something for everyone. We're known for our hops. We're known for Hop Drop and Roll, Radio Haze, the Imperial version of Hop Drop. We're known for our IPAs, but we have amazing pale ales. Jam Session is my favorite year-round beer by far. Love that beer. We have blondes. We have a year-round porter. And then we have amazing seasonals. So we have creative, fun cans.
Yeah.
So when you see us on the shelf, take a chance. It's not much of a chance. You're going to enjoy it if you like that style, and share with friends.
That's fun. Now you said that your husband Todd was a pilot.
He was.
And I think that may have inspired one of the art.
It did. So Cavu, which is our blonde ale, Cavu stands for Ceiling and Visibility Unlimited, an aviation term. So perfect flying days. You kick off the autopilot and you just fly and enjoy the clouds, enjoy everything. He flew bigger planes, but big planes, small planes, just enjoy the day. And it really fits for a blonde ale. It's perfectly refreshing on a warm day, but it's still pretty amazing and lets you dream of warmer days during the winter.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that's is a good wrap for me. I've gone through my list of questions.
Perfect.
Anything else that you want to share with the group as they're tasting through their beers?
Yeah, thank you for picking up the pack and supporting us. Hope you have as much fun drinking them, listening to Chad, feeling like you're here and having the experience. We appreciate that, and continue spreading the word.
Indeed.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers and welcome back, everyone. That man, Charles Slezak, is the guy that taught me how to take apart a tap faucet years and years ago. And this beer was my introduction to NoDa Brewery in 2014. I think we can fairly say it was the best IPA in the whole world.
That's it.
So,
Someone said it. A couple people did, at least.
I'm really excited to have this. This beer is going to complete my nights, and my beer notes are going to get really scribbly after we finish this one, Chad. But
It has that effect on people.
this we've
Or
already
fortunately,
we've talked kind of about the history of the IPA, as you mentioned, sailing around ships, and we've talked about New England IPAs. So one of the questions I just want to pivot and just start by asking you: this is your number one beer. It's been checked in almost 150,000 times on Untapped.
Wow.
Why do you think there's no right answer? It's a subjective question, but why do you think people love this beer so much?
I honestly think that we always intended it to be kind of what we saw the West Coast style IPA to be, and we've worked our butts off trying to make it like what we think is a good representation of it. And I think that the trends in the industry tend to try to go softer on bitterness, and the hazy has had a mostly positive effect, but I think that also it's made people a little afraid to embrace the bitter. And really, I mean, to us, it's kind of a big part of what the West Coast IPA was. And granted, we put most of the hops at the end of the brew and the dry hop and whatnot. I mean, like 90% of them go there. But we also are not afraid of embracing that bitter character and that bitter spirit. And like when we all think about the classic beers that we could only get if we made a trip to the West Coast, stuff like Pliny and Blind Pig and again like go into like the Firestone Walker IPAs, like everything those guys are putting out. We love that sharp character to it, and then the other part of it too is that like it's not an apologetic beer on the malt side either. I just did an interview with one of our providers for ingredients, and he was showcasing us for a meeting that they were doing, and he was like, I just want to make sure that you guys are using this 2-row when you make this, right? And I was like, yeah, we are. He's like, I just want to validate like what sort of products you guys are using in it. And he's like, well, going on to the hops. I was like, well, do you want to know what the other malts are? And he's like, do you guys have other malts in it? I was like, yeah, we have a lot of other malts in it, but it never comes on full blown as a malty beer. But it's this nice balance of like a really aggressive hop payload and then a really valid malt complexity that's underneath it. Then I've always kind of argued that when you're doing a West Coast style IPA, your malt and everything needs to be a good foundation for the hops to play upon, so it's like yanking the stage out from the actors if you don't have a good malt foundation to it. So it's got this mix of everything on top of the idea that when we first made it, we didn't have a whole lot of Citra hops or Amarillo hops for that matter to do it. So it was kind of a rare beer that we could throw out when we could, and then we kept trying to make more and more of it. And then when the World Beer Cup hit and it won gold, one, it was completely unexpected, and two, it just completely put this little brewery that was 3 years old on the map, on a world scale. And it was able to tell the story in itself. So I don't think we do anything that's groundbreaking to make this beer super unique, especially considering the inspiration for it and all the amazing decades of awesome West Coast brewers that have been doing it forever. But I take really, really, really great pride in the fact that the last time I checked, which was like 6 months ago, I think, we're still the only East Coast brewery to ever win the American IPA on World Beer Cup. So right. I'm super proud of that, and it's because we want to try to owe it to that West Coast concept, and and the West Coast term really is just implying that they just go heavy-handed on stuff. It's heavy resin, it's heavy bitter. They're right there where the greatest hops in the world grow, in my opinion, at least. Definitely the most aggressive hops as far as flavor profile, and this beer just kind of embodies it, and we don't shy away from it. We embrace it. And we've been riding in that car ever since. So.
This is amazing. And if you're someone who loves beer and are in your mid-30s or older and kind of grew up drinking like Green Flash's West Coast, and you were like, oh, this is amazing. And you like this beer is taking me back to that kind of those days where I was living off nothing but pizza and West Coast IPA. So this is the real deal. And I was going to ask you if you had known, like, if you guys were one of the only or one of the few, East Coast breweries to win that award. I imagine that's amazing that you guys are probably the one and only. So, but yeah, this is legit. This takes me back to my kind of formative years when beer kind of took over my my mind and was like, what the heck is this? I need to know more beers like this. So I'm pumped. We're finishing with it.
Awesome.
And I mentioned pizza, but that's obviously not the only food that exists. Sometimes I have to remind myself that. But when you're drinking this beer, is there something you kind of gravitate towards, Chad, or something you recommend people to enjoy? Or is this one of these beers that, like, like spicy stuff, have spicy things. If you like, something light, like, it kind of works with everything.
I actually don't think this beer works well with everything. The best thing you can pair this beer up with is a glass. But honestly, because it's such an aggressive beer, and it's aggressive in a nice way. It wrecks your palate, with apology the entire time. But I do actually recommend it with very rustic pizza. I definitely recommend it with Thai food. Thai food and all the spicy stuff is great for it.
Yes.
Hot wings, all that sort of classic things that have a lot of spice with it, because the hops play off the spice, and also it's one of the few beers that can handle a high heat level. So I mean, you don't have to have it just Thai food. You could do like a Fra Diavolo, like Italian dish with a ton of heat behind it. Pair it up with this, and you can roll with it. But like, I wouldn't pair a cheesecake up with this or anything like that. You can get off the map with it. But ultimately, like, most people just is this, you get a good rustic pizza, hot wings, or like some like spicy Thai shrimp dish or whatever. Like all those bright, hot. Again, non-apologetic food for a non-apologetic beer. It's a revving the engine sort of IPA. And that's, I mean, and again, it's an ode to all those beers that made us love hops. And it is a throwback to 6 to 10 years ago when everyone was trying to see how many IBUs could we get out of the beer. There was a day, ladies and gentlemen, when bitterness was actually really cool.
That's it.
But I think that its uniqueness and its stand on trying to be this ode to the West Coast IPA, and especially in an East Coast environment and in the Charlotte area, and we're far from the only brewery doing this style. I just think that we just made the strides with it, and our brand became really established and rooted here. And this was just that beer that everyone went to for like that solid hop experience, like from the very early times when we were opening up, a decade ago. And it's just stuck. And it's one of those things where it's like, again, this is like, what's the next big boom going to be? It's like, well, whatever the people buy. And this beer just kept going in. And this is a beer that I'm really happy that our brewers and myself get to go to work knowing that the majority of the beers we're going to make include all the hops that go into this beer. So we brew this beer probably 30 to 40% of the time on the brew stand. And the amount of resin that we have to dig out from our fingernails from handling all those hops and whole leaf hops. I'm actually leaning on our hop back right now. And then we load this guy up with 100 pounds of Citra and Amarillo whole leaves and pull about 98 pounds worth of pelletized hops for the entire brew through. And, we're never doing just one batch. There's always 3 or 4 batches that run through it. And then the person that's going to dry hop, it's going to, throw hundreds of pounds of Citra and Amarillo into our injection tool to do it. And so it's like, if you don't like hops, then find somewhere else to work. But you look at a lot of other breweries that make awesome year-round beers that are the flagship beer that are like, this is our amber ale, or this is our lager, or this is our, they're fine beers, but it's like, that's what the majority they're going to make, or that's the big beer they're going to make over and over again. And for our big beer that we make over and over again to be a 7.2%, 80 plus IBU, like huge hop payload sort of beer for a brewer and for the guys that work for us, like that's a pretty cool nerd out experience that they get to experience those hops going in over and over again. This beer, and it's also just like, even on grain side, if you're a nerd for grain, which I guess can exist, every single batch of this is 4,200 pounds of grain.
Wow.
So it's just this huge, big beast that just runs through the system. And then we hit it back with huge beastie amounts of hops. So it's just every part of the process from beginning to end. This beer is just this kind of life into itself. And I think that I hope that you can get that from the beer. And actually this beer, trying to make it more consistent and make it more refined and everything like that, has actually written the Q&A and QC protocol. Like when you guys saw us, me and Anthony talking in the lab, like every protocol we have is based on hop drop as the benchmark for it.
Right.
So it has written our QA policy here.
That's one of the questions. I'm friends with. I'd like to be friends with all the den masters, but the state's a really big place. But one of the den masters out in Leland, North Carolina, kind of came up with me, and he was asking what's the schedule like for a commercial brewer? I mean, in my head, I show up, I'm in your tap room, I'm ordering a flight, everybody's having a good time, but like, do you guys, you said you sometimes are brewing in the wee hours of the morning. Is there a regular schedule? Are you guys doing like 30 batches of hop drop a day, or?
Not 30 batches, no.
Yeah.
We'd fall apart if we did that. If you saw when I was pointing at the system in the tour, it takes about 7 hours for a batch to go from the grain hitting the water to where we put it in the fermenter. We can cascade them around, but we usually do triple to quad batch brew days, usually 3 to 4 days out of the week. We will sometimes have like a dedicated cleaning or a minor brew day with a cleaning day on top of it as well. We're going to inevitably move into like a double shift of like a quad to hexa brew, and then on the weekends probably do heavy cleaning. Without the cleaning, you shouldn't brew. Like you have to keep stuff clean. And so on the hot side where I'm standing right now, where all the brewing stuff happens, you just have to make sure everything's maintained and cleaned and stuff sprayed out and all that sort of stuff. But on the fermenting side, it's really rigorous. So we have to be able to, but all that's going on normally. But as far as the brew house itself, we have to dedicate at least a day to really get it deeply cleaned. Otherwise, stuff's just going to start going all over the place for us. But if we're doing a quad batch, we'll start at 1:30, 2 a.m. And we'll brew in through probably about 6 or 7 at night. And I've done all sorts. I've done over 24-hour shifts and stuff like that. Especially back in the early day when we were trying to figure stuff out. And also done later shifts that go into 11 o'clock at night, midnight, or whatever. And usually we like to front load the day. That's us personally. We have myself and my lead brewer. We tend to like to be able to. We would rather come in at 1, 2 in the morning and hammer it out and make sure that everything's going really awesome in the day, and then have someone else come in at like 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever, and then carry the rest of the day out for us and go into the afternoon, and not have someone lingering here at like 11 o'clock at night or whatever. So we try to forward set the day. That's our personal preference. But you're usually looking at anywhere between like 14 to 18 hours of a brew day on a triple or quad batch brew. And all the time that's happening, there's stuff in the cellar, transfers, dry hoppings, moving, centrifuging stuff, and then the packaging lines running the whole time. So it's a really multifaceted thing. It's a nightmare to really schedule out, because everything has to be ready before something else goes into it. So it's always kind of like this, trying to move all your pieces at the same time, trying to figure out what's got to come next. And then all of that is also then dictated with how much cooler space do we have, and what orders are going to be picked up, or what orders are going to go out. So it's a little hectic, but that's what makes it fun though, because right now we don't have any day that's normal. Every day is dependent. Every day depends on what's going on.
Cheers
so
to
I
that.
I could say there's no mundane at NoDa Brewing Company. So I could say we do a triple or quad batch about 3 or 4 days out of the week, maybe a double or something like that, or a single batch during the day. And that's a really simple way of saying it. But all the other things that are going on in the day, you have to take into consideration for everything. Because if you're on the brew stand brewing, you also have to worry about what's going on in the cellar. You have to worry about what's going on in the warehouse, all that sort of stuff. So every day presents a new thing that you have to consider yourself with. But also that's a lot of why I wanted to be a brewer. When I looked at like what it would take, what I thought at least it would take to be a brewer, and so far I've been right for most of it. It hit every single thing that I wanted to have as far as a career is concerned. So the idea to wake up early in the morning with an idea in my head to create something that I think would be a cool embodiment of an idea or a concept or a flavor or for some occasion or whatever. And then go in and do the analytical process and the mathematical part of actually seeing, can this thing exist? Do I have the resources to make it happen? And then you go into the physical sweat and lifting of moving all the ingredients around, moving all the hoses and everything like that, and actively brewing it. And then being able to monitor it and do more analytical stuff, and then also be able to then go out and share the final product with people. That concept, I get a creative, an analytical, a physical, and a social stimulus on every single day that I come into work. And that has been my life from that point. And the fact that every day is new never makes those 4 things go out of focus, but it always changes what thing I have to focus on. So it's very difficult, and it's very stressful at times. So at the end of the day, we always get to smile because we get to make beer, and I love it for that. I wouldn't rather do anything else in the world. So, and this beer kind of embodies it. So
that's right. I love it. Rick Helms. That's right. Coming in. Hop Drop is the GOAT of West Coast. Hot take from Rick. I love it. And it is. This is the real deal. If this is your first time enjoying it, or the first time you're having a West Coast IPA, as Chad said, like 6 to 10 years ago, this was like the hot ticket. Everyone was trying to make this beer, and I remember Vinny from Russian River saying, America's lupulin threshold has changed, and we're trying to catch up. And that kind of was like a gauntlet thrown down to the beer world. And it was like, right, how many IBUs can you slam at a beer? And this is, as I've said before, taking me back. This is awesome.
Thank you. It's another thing that I think is kind of funny in reference to this, throwing it back. Stan Hieronymus wrote a book on hops, and early on it's talking about the American cultivation of hops, and a lot of English brewers and hop cultivators would come over and sample some of the hops that were growing in the Pacific Northwest, and the word American became like a diss on a hop. It was like, this hop is too American. And now most English breweries are trying to copy our hazy IPAs. So for what it's worth.
Cyclical, like you said. Exactly right.
Daryl chimes in with a beautiful guitar in the woods, Daryl. This Hop Drop and Roll is deliciousness. Great beer. Thanks to NoDa, Chad, Lowe's Foods, and all those who bought a box, the 56 that checked in watched this at some point. So people earning that virtual beer hunt badge on Untappd for checking in your beers if you haven't checked into one of these yet. But seriously, yeah, thanks, Chad, for deciding not to be a medical career person
Right.
and help the rest of the world in a much more proactive way by giving us delicious beer, and Lowe's for bringing it to me here on the East Coast of North Carolina, because it's a lot easier to drive to Lowe's than it is to Charlotte.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What do we have here? Jennifer, shout out to Brad at Lowe's 270 for recommending this. Such a fun night for a couple of beer nerds. NoDa makes stellar beers. Cheers. Cheers to you, Jennifer. Yes.
Try to keep it up.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Maybe we have time to answer this from Charles Slezak, the director of beverages at Lowe's Foods. In my opinion, like the godfather of the beer den. So there's sure to be several home brewers in the audience today, right? Home brewers, I think, make the greatest professional brewers. And so with that in mind, what's the best brewing advice you've received, Chad?
That's a hard one, because it always kind of depends on what month or what year you're in, because the journey of becoming a professional brewer is really, there's things that are weighed upon your shoulders when all of a sudden you're looking at someone's buying your product versus let me see what I can do in my garage and then give it to my friends.
Right.
And Todd and Susie invested their entire lives into this company. So, the idea of doing something wrong and having it affect that is a haunting thing. I think one of the biggest evolutions I had, and it sounds kind of strange to say it, but to feel confident in what we were doing and what we were saying, what we were trying to do, was one of the hardest things I had to kind of get over, because I knew I could brew good beer, but like knowing that I could do it the best way that I could do it was the hardest part about it. And it wasn't someone telling me it, but I think it just finally clicked. And I went from being at Craft Brewers Conference, CBC, I went from being a timid guy afraid to ask questions at vendors and stuff like that, to being someone who was confident in what we were doing and wanting to learn more, with simply the realization that no one's got it figured out. There's always going to be someone that can figure something out further, and anecdotal evidence in science world is the lowest common denominator of science. So always strive to be able to quantify something more. If you have the ability to quantify it more, even if it's on a sensory level and just writing a bunch of notes down, do it and try to find another way to do it better. If you can do that, you will soon start to understand multiple deeper layers of everything you're doing on a production side, on a beer-to-beer side. The more stuff that you can quantify and account for, the more you can understand about the end product itself. And that applies to home brewers, professional brewers, anybody. But that was like the biggest breaking point and breakthrough with me, was that I was so determined to earn the ability to be a professional brewer. I didn't ever think about, am I doing it always the right way? Or, I've had a ton of different people will tell me they thought it was this or that. I had no proof of anything. And until I finally was like, you know what, I'm doing it this way, and I'm going to see if anyone's got a better way to do it. And you have to be humble about it. So it's a combination of striving to be the best that you can, but also being humble in the approach to it, and being confident in what you have done will make the perfect package of being able to constantly grow in the right direction.
I love it. That's right.
Thank you.
That's great advice, period. All right, Lindsay, what's Lindsay got to say? Thank you. This is great for me and my husband. Again, date night happening all over the place. Love it. Thanks again.
Thank
great
you.
time. Yes, it was. Rick, NoDa loves food rocks. Yes. Right. If you're like me, you're one empty bag of trail mix, a bunch of beers down, and smiling, laughing, having a good time. John, I would take a second to thank everyone at NoDa for this. Thank all you guys out there. Thank you, Lowe's Foods. I mean, this was so much fun. There's so many people behind the scenes, too, that you didn't get to see today that are pulling levers. And just imagine a high school play of people dressed in black, jumping around, moving bags of sand, costume changes. No, it's not that crazy. But it was a lot that had to happen to make this all look as great as it did and make us all look like well, for John and I, at least, what we were talking about. Chad, no problem there. And if you guys are looking, right, if you're looking for to grab more of these beers, there are still virtual beer hunt boxes with NoDa beer in it available at your local Lowe's. So go check it out. Do round 2 yourself. Maybe rewatch this. That sort of thing.
Definitely grab some more of that blood orange Gosa, because that's not going to be around all year long. And that was the beginning of a beautiful night for me. Right. For those of you that are already planning your next date night, May 1st, you'll see the virtual beer hunting boxes start to go on sale for Edmonds Oast. And that's so North Carolina. That was like a race car, NASCAR track intermission. May 1st.
It's probably a souped up moped.
Right. Somebody's bringing home some hop, drop, and roll in a hurry. May 1st at your local beer den, Lowe's Foods. Pick up a box for Edmonds Oast and look for us on May 15th. We'll be doing this again. Harrison, anything else from you?
Yeah, of course. So the QR code you guys scan to check any beers in the tap, right beneath it, there we go on the screen now. There's another QR code to share your thoughts about tonight's event. It takes you to a survey. Love to hear from you guys. What did you like about this event? How can we improve for the next one? If you would take a few moments to let us know what you thought, we'd really appreciate it.
I guess other than that, Chad, anything from you? Maybe
more wisdom?
No more wisdom. Just a very humble thank you guys for having us be a part of this. Honestly, as a brewer and as you guys keep doing this, it's going to become apparent. Every craft beer has a story. So thank you guys for supporting it. And please do check out the Edmonds Oast guys. Those are awesome guys. They make awesome beer. And just keep it rolling, because brewers like to talk about their babies, is what it is. And like I don't put a cap on like how many barrels you produce a year or anything like that. Craft beer is made with love and intention and has a story behind it. So there's a world of stuff out there to discover. And every time we get to tell our story and you get to understand it a little bit further, you just grow as a great craft beer drinker and a great craft beer supporter. So thank you guys for having us be a part of it. And I can't wait to see what comes down the line.
I had a blast. From everyone here, guys, cheers. Have a great night.
Cheers.
Consider yourself.